It's another Thursday on Jasiri, and we have a lineup of conversations that demand attention. First, we bring you the latest updates in the ongoing Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan saga, a story that continues to unfold with new developments and implications and new levels of embarrassment for me. What's the latest? What does it mean moving forward? We've got the details. Then we turn our focus to the ever-evolving world of digital media, women's representation, and the future of journalism. Now, as media landscapes shift, who controls the narrative? How do we ensure that women's voices are amplified, not sidelined? And what does the future hold for journalism in an era of rapid digital transformation? It's a power-packed show with deep insights and critical discussion. So stay tuned. Jasiri starts now.
I really thought that we were going to have a day or two break when it comes to the developments in the Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan saga, but it was not to be. So let's start with an update from INEC. The Independent National Electoral Commission has now confirmed that it has received the contact addresses, telephone numbers, and email addresses of the petitioners who are asking for a recall. In a statement issued on Wednesday, the electoral umpire who will oversee the recall process said that INEC said it had now received the phone numbers and email addresses of the petitioners who were missing in the initial petition submitted to the commission. Sam Olumekun, INEC spokesperson, said the commission has written to the presiding officers of the Senate, as well as Akpoti-Uduaghan, who the petitioners sought to recall, to inform them of the commencement of the process. INEC noted that the next step is to scrutinize the list of signatories submitted by the petitioners to ascertain that the petition is signed by more than 50% of the registered voters in the constituency. Now, I want us to quickly think about the timeline. It was on Monday that the petition to start the recall process was submitted to INEC in Abuja. On Tuesday, INEC said that the petition submitted did not include the contact addresses, telephone numbers, and email addresses of the petitioners. On Wednesday, INEC said it had received the missing information for a couple 100,000 people.
Please note that Kogi Central has 488,000 registered voters, but only 250,000 signatures, representing about 43% of the electorate, were submitted for the recall process. There were 106,000 votes cast in the 2023 senatorial election that eventually saw Akpoti-Uduaghan as the winner. Some say that for Kogi Central, more than 244,000 voters need to sign. So technically, the number needed might be around 290,000 because it is anticipated that some signatures will be disqualified. Now, as it is, the 250,000 signatures fall short of the 290,000 threshold. Do the math, raising questions about the petition's validity. However, the Federal High Court in Lokoja recently allowed the process to proceed, citing constitutional rights. The gap between the recall signatures, 250,000, and later 474,554, and actual votes in the election brings to the fore a systemic issue. With 40% of registered voters abstaining in the 2023 election, the system could be exploited by groups using low turnout or inflated voter rolls to their advantage. The recall effort raises questions about the country's democratic safeguards against political vendettas. So no Nigerian lawmaker has ever been successfully recalled since the 1999 Constitution introduced the process. Please note that many attempts have been made, but none so far have met the legal requirements.
Now let's take a quick break. Let's take a quick break and we'll continue.
Welcome again. And the saga continues on the INEC. The INEC statement wasn't the only development in this ongoing controversy on Wednesday. Senator Nwaebonyi has dug in his heels regarding the exchange between him and the former Minister of Education, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. But that's not why he's making the news again. Senator Nwaebonyi was a guest on News Central now and has gone viral for comments he made regarding Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. It's better we hear it from him. So please take a look.
Accused Reno of mockery of sexual harassment during the time of Goodluck Jonathan as president, when the young man was already in US attending to national issue. But of unlucky to her, she didn't know that this young man was outside the country. Upon the slightest provocation, she will come up with allegation of sexual harassment. And I don't know what is wrong with this lady. Does she think that she's the most beautiful woman on earth? Or is it because she's had chocolate color? In my own assessment, she's not among the beautiful women in Nigeria. And it is high time we come hard on her. And why people like us are speaking on top of our voice is not just to protect and defend the Senate president, but to protect and defend her future victims. Even her present husband, she married her out of something like this. She threatened to sue the man and have a letter circulating over the world that the man should pay her 10 billion or marry her. The man had to marry her under duress. So the marriage was under duress, another product of blackmail. I was watching a video of how the father of the first wife of the husband narrated her ordeal when this lady came into their family, destabilized their family, and took over her husband.
All right.
And without going into her character, I asked Senator Natasha how many husbands has she had in her life.
Hold it. Let's take reactions because I know I will not be able to bring the ladies back. Let's take reactions first. And then it's no holds barred. Let's see what people had to say. This was an interview that he gave on our news yesterday at 3 p.m. No matter the level of resentment, I believe a senator, while addressing another senator like himself, should couch and choose his language with some level of decency and decorum. She is your honorable colleague, sir. Mind your language. I can't remember this guy proposing a single bill or even contributing to debates. This must be the most unfortunate era of representation for Ebonians from top to bottom, the kind that should be recalled. It is shameful to know that this is the best a senatorial district could produce to represent them. This is more of a personal attack. I expect the committee investigating this issue to be neutral, but from what the senator is saying, nothing good will come out of this investigation. So the best defense the Senate could come up with is to throw these derogatory remarks and berate her beauty to make a point instead of doing the needful, laughing. They should just make a law that some top government officials are untouchable and should never be held accountable. Simple. Oh, I do believe we did have there were a few comments on our Twitter timeline where the video was posted that did support him. Someone was saying it's all fair in the game.
Lolo, I'm done. If I hear you hold brief, sit on this table and hold brief for that man, saying that they should not tell him shut up. Did you hear what he spewed right now?
I am mortified.
Would you go so low? One has absolutely nothing to do with another. But he sat there, marinated in there, and with such gusto.
That's your favorite word, gusto.
I'm serious. I'm ashamed on his behalf.
Honestly, I look at them and I'm wondering that these are the kinds of people that we call leaders. There is something called decorum. There's something called decency. This is not about her person. Now we are falling into the arena. I told you that I'm tired. You know, Masha I was looking at Masha's comment today on this particular matter, how she was posting, and I told her I was tired. And I am tired, I am disheartened. I do not have any words. I know where this is headed. All this is railroading. This one is throwing under the bus. Now they are bringing her personality into something that is supposed to be argued in court.
All right. So
now it's about her person, how many husbands she has had, her beauty, all those things that the man is talking about. How is that relevant?
Is that what is disturbing
So,
their fellow Senate members?
All of these things he said, I do not believe is public information because I don't think I've heard these things you're saying before. So my question is, what is the punishment or repercussion for such loose-mouthedness? And those are slanderous statements. And for the first, almost half of the entire conversation, you were bitter about the fact that people thought she's pretty.
Beautiful.
And that's the issue.
Yes.
That's the bulk. That's
Are
the
you
meat
serious?
of the
So that means this woman's beauty
Ladies, is a
has always
problem
been
to her. Has been a
Yes,
problem.
I said it.
So first, I'm going to encourage viewers out there, please go to our YouTube timeline or our any of our timelines and watch the whole interview. He was on News Central Now yesterday at 3 p.m. Being interviewed by one of our anchors. So I need to say a few things because when you look at the research and you look at the, I like research and data in situations of rape, claims of sexual harassment and that. People are always looking for the perfect victim. The perfect victim. So let's be honest, if she was an ugly woman, if she was generally accepted to be not as attractive as many people, the things would be here is you're not fine. You're not fine.
Yeah.
Why is it you that they should harass?
Yes.
Why is it you? Now she's pretty.
Now
It's a problem. Now you're trying to downplay. You're trying to. All I see at the end, there are attempts to humble her that go beyond the allegations she's made.
Yeah.
And I need to reference the fact that don't forget that this gentleman is actually part of the panel.
Yeah.
But because he was a witness, he stepped down from the panel to come and be a witness for the Senate president. And I need to also say this, Senate President Godswill Akpabio, this is the kind of person
representing you.
What does that
speak
say?
on this issue, to be a witness for you on this issue, is making me question your character.
I do not.
It doesn't make sense.
Does that
I
even
wish I
say?
could put my purse under my armpit and just be going.
No, if all
because
of
this
us-
is not going to end well for
if
any.
all of us are using the same microscope, and there's something, is it endoscopy, where you put in
Yeah.
If we are all doing that endoscopy on the Senate President, on this man himself,
Are we not going to find a lot of things
if you're
there?
so happy to come out and regurgitate and speak all these things that have no business being in the public ear.
So vile.
So easily.
Do men not have many words? I know.
Quarters.
I'm not holding brief for Senator Natasha.
3/4 of what he said.
Do men not have more
was
than one
away
wife
from
and
the
multiple
fact.
They're side
concubines?
chicks.
And focused on
And side chicks. You know levels. Do you know there are levels to their mistressing?
Let's not go there. Catherine, you wanted to say something because we have a guest waiting.
It's okay.
What do you want to talk?
Bless him.
Look, I don't know, man.
No, I think I said it off here and I'll say it now. This whole thing is now very, very messy. You're leaving the weight of the issues, the weight of the allegations, and then the weight of the panel. And it's going to be very, very difficult for the panel to come out either with a judgment in her favor or a judgment against the Senate president. At the point that we're at now, nobody leaves this clean. Nobody leaves this above board.
Yeah.
And for this to be what we hear from a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there was a comment that said that he shouldn't be talking about her like this because she's his fellow senator.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to what Lolo said yesterday. It's not about him talking about her like that because she's his fellow senator, but because she's a human, not because she's even a woman. We need decorum and decency. I always say the people who hold these offices, they don't seem to understand the power of the offices.
She can
they don't have, they don't seem to
issues of
understand
talking about her personally. You do not know what happened in her marriages. And now you are making an open statement as if you have evidence.
If anybody should be recalled.
She married her husband.
Does her being married 3 times or however she got married, does it disqualify her from being a potential victim of sexual harassment?
It does.
No, it doesn't.
Dr. Ezekwesili called this man a hooligan. Ne? They tell me how he can distance himself from that term.
From the accusations
when he's
against him
actually
now.
marinating himself in that.
And the Senate is not looking at this and saying this is
Calling
something
them
wrong.
to
And not just even the people he's representing. If you want, I think that if we want to, magnify this recall process, be looking at the people representing you because now this is what is representing you. I won't even say the person.
And people from his state, Ebonyi state, are distancing themselves from.
This man is from your state.
She needs another state for us to focus on. All right, before we move on, because we do have a guest waiting, I just quickly need us to note that Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan did give like a shout out to Dr. Obi Ezekwesili yesterday because of all the back and forth and the fear that's been happening to her. And she very much gave her respect, saying that she knows that Dr. Ezekwesili has been taking these bullets, has been taking the flack that's been coming her way because of her. And I think that's something to be appreciated. When people stand by you, we also should be seen to appreciate those who stand by us. All right, we've kicked things off on a high note, and I know that a lot of you have something to say. Please head to our Twitter, our social media timelines. We're at News Central TV. But up next, Lolade Nwanze is back as we get deeper into the evolving media landscape, digital journalism, and the power of representation. But yes, the power of reputation too.
Yep.
There's still so much more to unpack, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break.
Some conversations are just too important to wrap up in one sitting. And today we are thrilled to have our guest back with us. This is still Jasiri. If you're just joining us, well, welcome. Our guest is Lolade Nwanze, and the last time she was here, we barely scratched the surface on the evolving media landscape, the power of digital journalism, and the ever-growing influence of social media on news and public discourse. But there's still so much more to unpack. So get into another insightful discussion on digital media, journalism, the role of new voices shaping the narratives in Nigeria, the numbers versus the news that actually matter with us. Lolade Nwanze is a journalist, digital expert, and PR communications consultant. She was recently endorsed as a global talent in digital technology by the United Kingdom, and she joins us now. Plus, she's got a great smile.
Yeah.
Welcome, Lolade.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Lolade.
Thank
It's
you.
so good to have you back because the last time you were here, it was like the time just flew away from us.
Yeah,
And we
I
just couldn't even
know.
get into the meat of what we wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for coming. You know, the last time you were here, we talked about media regulation, citizen or not citizen journalism, because it's in question now, and many more. So now let's pick up from where we left the last time you were here, shall we? Like an English lady. One of your last comments was that of that the business model for media houses is still broken, and that the person who cracks that code will be doing a lot of us a good service, and it will be a big favor actually. So what's wrong with the current model? Many media houses are operating. We have digital, we have traditional media like TV, we have print, we have radio, digital media. And what model is everybody operating on? At least if we even know what the model looks like, we'll be able to know what the broken parts feel like.
Okay, so from a business perspective, we would see that the majority of revenue for most media houses, especially mainstream media houses, traditional media houses now, and even digital, comes from advertising. More than 50% of revenue coming into every media house usually comes from advertising. And before now, it even used to be a larger percentage. So that is actually where the challenge is. Most of this revenue, most times, this advertising revenue comes from maybe governments and corporates, right? And that's where they come from. However, with the entrance of technology, what we have now found is that the budgets have become slimmer. Why? Because the audience is no longer just concentrated among a few media houses. The audience is online on Instagram. The audience is chasing after,
Fragmented.
We're all chasing a smaller audience.
We're all chasing a smaller audience, exactly. And so because of that, naturally, the budget now needs to be, it's become thinner. The budget that comes to, say, mainstream media is thinner because now it goes to not just organizations like News Central, but now they also need to go into pockets of individuals that have become forces of their own,
Influencers.
Absolutely, influencers. And so what that then means that we need to find other sources for our income, right? We can't still be waiting on advertising to bring in the most of our money. So we need to start thinking about what other ways can we generate revenue, because there are bills to be paid, right? Loads of bills to be paid, yeah. So you know, what other things can we do? Okay, partnerships, there's the collaborations. What do we do? Do we do productization of some of our programs? What we want to do really is we want to unbundle the media center, as it were. So what we do usually with traditional mainstream media houses usually is we have so many products that we offer, whether from the morning belt down to the evening belt, loads of potential products. We have content across several niches. So you look into each of these niches and say, okay, how can we productize some of these niches, such that they become income points on their own, so that way everyone is now bringing something in. Do you get? And I think that this is something that we need to really look into. And of course, there's also the place of technology, which we still really need to master, because technology is a leveler nowadays, and it is what is super responsible for, just widening the gap, if you like. The money would always follow after the audience. That's what happened when technology came. This was what it did. The first thing it did was it took our audience, right? And then the second thing it took our money, right? Because the money would chase after where the audience is, right? Yeah. And so after it took our audience, and then it took our advertisers, and then now we have to go and meet technology and say, hey, you know what? We want some of that audience back. What can we do? How can we work together?
You know, this thing you're saying, I've seen some. So one, there's a lot of media organizations, particularly newspapers and what do you call them, legacy media, that are doing paywall. But there is technology. People have created sites for you to be able to go behind the paywall, and they're saying that okay, we can give you the basics, but let us appreciate the work that goes into what we give you and go and pay for this yearly subscription. And then there are other times, depending on the medium, you go onto their website and you see a small message at the bottom, please support good media.
Yeah,
if good media is necessary and good media takes money.
Absolutely.
But people oftentimes, a lot of companies they're not successful with the paywall.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to just add to what, because you suggested that we need to start looking for new
Revenue
means
streams.
of revenue streams. And I know that regulation is another thing we have to look at. Because I remember when we were on radio, a lot of us have become brands who were taking our, our fame was being sold by our media spaces. But many of us could not be branded because of some regulation.
Because of the regulation.
I remember some of us had to pay heavy fines because we had our faces on billboards and they say, oh, a newscaster cannot do this, a DJ cannot do that. Because those are some of the things that we can actually make some
Monetize
extra
in a way.
revenue if we have brands like all of us. And there are so many things that I cannot do because I am doing this. Those are things that maybe we need to tweak legislations to.
Exactly. So I think these are conversations that definitely need to be brought to the table, right? So we need to talk to some of the things that, if you think about it, for example, NUJ, should bring front and center because we have all of these bodies. NUJ, NGE, Nigerian Guild of Editors, Nigerian Union of Journalists. These are the kind of conversations that they should be having on our behalf, so that we don't have these limitations. Because the people that we today, the other news channels that we have, I'm talking now about citizen journalists, we're talking now about influencers, talking now about bloggers, all those people who really hold sway on the internet, they are not limited by all of that.
Yes.
And as such, I mean, there's a lot of cons as a result of that, where they really go off, right? But at the same time, it also gives them that opportunity to be able to literally just milk any and everything. So essentially, regulation needs to catch up with where the media is at today. And Tolu, you talked about paywall the other time. I think it was one of the first things that people kind of started experimenting with, I remember. And then we realized very quickly that, okay, for some economies, really, it can work. But for some other economies, honestly, people would prioritize eating first. I mean, I need to eat first and pay school fees before I can think of renewing my subscription. Do you get? So something like that, it realistically would not fly in Nigeria. I mean, even older countries, even in bigger climes. I remember, I think NYT, that's New York Times, that was the first really to actually make that work. I remember that was about 2018, 19, thereabout. They were the first actually. I was like, oh, okay, what's this model? I remember even going to New York, then having meetings, etc. Around it. But we have realized with time that it is not the way to go. And it's not the way to go at the end of the day. It's just going to be one of the multiples. So essentially, we need to diversify our sources.
Well, there are so many places we haven't gotten there yet in Nigeria in terms of media and journalism. We see many countries who are demanding, take accountability for what you do. If you edit something, own up to it. If you're paid for something, own up to it. I know we're not there yet. So if you now look at citizen journalists and influencers and all of that, do you think they should be held to the same ethical standards as traditional journalists? And that's one question. The second question would be that what responsibility, because whether we like it or not, they are shaping public discourse. So what responsibilities do social media personalities have in ensuring that they don't spread false narratives, aka fake news?
So I'll take the first question about if they should be held to the same ethical standards that we have. I think it would be unfair to hold them to it because they don't even know it. We can be held to it because we are trained for this.
So how can, can't we hold them to learn it? You say we can't hold them to it, but can we hold them to learn it first?
So that's where some form of, I wouldn't call it control, needs to come in, right? Or regulation in some way, right, needs to come in. And So I'm not for the social media bill, I should say that here categorically. However, I do think that some form of regulation does need to come in just to sanitize the space a bit. But then this is also something that's going to be really, really difficult to enforce. We've seen platforms try to do something in the sense that there was this time, they stood it up to you now, they tell you if you are a brand, and creator, you need to put it in your bio, for example. If you are doing something in partnership with the brand, you need to say that this is sponsored, by the way. Do you get? So I think that's the platforms now trying to make sure that's for example, maybe Instagram or Facebook saying you need Instagram is right, that's one I know of, and then YouTube. You need to say, okay, I'm doing this in partnership with that person, or this is sponsored by that brand. So that's the level to which we see them being transparent. But when it comes to all of these other unofficial news sources, I'm talking about the blogs, the Instablog Niger, and all of those other handles, there's really nobody monitoring that space. And if you ask me, I do think that the law of libel and defamation should not apply only to established media houses.
Yes.
It should not. If you publish something libelous, then you should be taken up for it.
Yes.
Straight up. It should not just be because I have a local address, I have a physical address, so I can be muscled, right? And then you can turn off my advertising, and use it to punish me, right? And then you can find my station because something. But these people also need to know that law exists, right? And we need to. It can be used against them. That is very, very, very important. Honestly, it is important.
As you talk about this point, it makes me go back to Senator Ned Nwoko's bill talking about the physical offices for accountability. He says for taxation and employment as well. I think we get into that a bit later. But when you set yourself up as a source of information, you have to be responsible if that information is wrong. And again, as you said, they're not trained. We can call ourselves media practitioners because we have the training.
Absolutely.
They're not trained in it, but I think there's a level of responsibility, as you said, that they hold and that they need to be accountable for.
Yes.
We're going to continue this conversation in just a moment. When we come back, do you think you're the one making the news choices you're making? Are you sure about that? We'll get you an answer after this. The ladies on the table are not exactly sure how much listening our social media apps are doing, but there's a lot going on that we as individuals who use social media need to be aware of. Now, Lolade, I've heard before that, we think we're the ones making the choices on social media. I think I'm the one choosing to read this story or to follow this blog or to be involved in these conversations. But there's what happens at the front end and what happens at the back end. Then there's the algorithm at play. But in all honesty, a lot of people believe now that many of the social media platforms are herding us into certain decisions and into accepting certain things as normal. Even if you're not the person who's been searching for questionable content, you find out that every time you refresh, there's at least one or two questionable things that come up. And you're like, but these are not the kind of things I engage with, but they're somehow in our faces. And so when it comes to news, it becomes a bigger issue because it seems like people are being, as I said, herded in the direction to have a certain idea. You can remember the situation in Facebook and the Rohingya Muslims in Indonesia and how Facebook has been, has been attacked and criticized for being partly responsible for the inflaming of that situation and in other things as well. I can't remember the name of the company that they said was involved in Nigeria's elections that brought former President Muhammadu Buhari in and got Jonathan out that involved the U.S. So you just have a lot of people who are on social media and there's a lot of manipulation at play. We think we're the ones making certain choices, but it's like we are given 5 choices, but we make one choice. How do we work all of this out? Who really controls the news? Who really controls the narratives that we see at play now?
I mean, a few years ago, that would have been a simple question to answer. Maybe about a decade ago. Nowadays, it's just honestly a complex question because there are several parties at play. But then I think one thing, before I would have said, it's the editors. I mean, it's the gatekeepers. They decide what story goes on, what story gets told on TV, and what story gets published in the newspaper. But nowadays, it is no longer that. The way it now works is it's a system we call the algorithm. So platforms essentially, and it makes me, this is a question I typically ask when I do a media training or what have you, is content still king? You remember growing up and tell you, okay, growing up here really is like back in the days and they say, content is king. And nowadays, like, is it really still king, really? Or is it the platform that is now king? Because at the end of the day, when you do produce whatever it is that you do, it needs to get to your audience. And who decides who gets what you put together? It comes to the algorithm. So who controls it at the end of the day? complex question, like I did say, but I'd say that a chief player in that really are the platforms. Honestly, it is the platforms, and who are the people controlling the platforms. That's why nowadays, when you're as a media house, when you do your competitor benchmarking, for example, and you're drawing up who are usually your competition is. Your competition is not just your other news stations or your other media houses. No, you're competing literally with the publishers, the big publishers like Facebook. You get like Google. You're competing with Twitter, and you're there looking at the kind of technology that they do have, the kind of access that they do have. You do not have it right. So at the end of the day, we all still need to partner with them, to make sure that what news needs to be told gets to the right audience. So yes, to a very large extent, the control of news has shifted, from the newsroom greatly into the hand of the distribution networks. It sadly is what it is, but it doesn't then mean that we're entirely powerless at the end of the day, because we are going to need to still stick to our guns and do what we know is right, because we need to make sure that in that pool of content which exists either on Google or on Facebook or wherever people go for their stories, our content is also still there, so that somewhere in the mix it does come up. And I remember when a lot of this kind of became like big deal at the time, it looked like we were working together. Media houses needed to partner with the Facebook and the Googles, to make sure that distribution was sort of fair, and make sure that there is a promotion, active promotion of trusted news by credible sources. So they had this thing whereby they would prioritize stories, the feed from the news centrals, the Guardians, established media houses, to make sure that the feeds
at the top of the feed,
was sanitized, but a lot of that's not the case nowadays. A lot has happened since then.
Wow, there's so much happening in the digital space, honestly. And I want to believe that Nigeria's media landscape is evolving, and very fast at that.
Yes.
And social media has become a battleground for truth, activism, and influence. But it has also opened the door to, misinformation and government intervention. And when we hear government intervention in
everybody's
Nigeria,
muscle.
everybody's like, what's happening there? I don't want that. But how can media organizations, maintain credibility? Because I know that these soft cells are there. At least they're dishing some form of news. But how do the organizations that matter really maintain credibility when competing with viral content from unverified sources? We can't even lie. Right now, somebody can just be at the scene of an accident and is taking live coverage of what happened. It's just that we covered the news of when the gas tanker exploded. But we knew what happened as at that time. But other sources, the news kept evolving, and other stories kept coming out of who died, who didn't die, those kinds of things. How do they maintain their credibility?
I think, first of all, it's us remembering why we exist. And honestly, we do exist for our audience. And there's this level of trust that they have in us, which we just cannot afford to lose, right? Already, I think we talked about trust a bit in the first part of this conversation. But we need to know that it's just that point of responsibility that we have. We can't afford to be reckless. The penalty for us when we make mistakes are bigger, right? People trust us more, honestly. When people go online, for example, which is part of the things that people also should do, when you go online and you find a story, the first question should be, which handle is this?
Yes.
Do you get? Yeah. So when you have someone is telling you, you didn't see, hey, I saw it, so he's on Instagram, this thing has up and down, as I say, who? Yeah. Who told you? I said, so where did you see it? You say, which handle? Do you get? That should be your first question, because the story is only as good as its source. Yes. At the end of the day, so it's like, who is saying it? And that's where it should come from. We can afford to be as reckless. I mean, virality is good. It is great. It is something that every media house talks about one way or the other. However, it cannot be our focus. At the end of the day, for us, it will always be facts first. But just nowadays, we now need to balance we need to balance speed with accuracy. That's the challenge that we are on. And that's why we are always going to need technology to help us with that. But honestly, we just cannot mortgage certain things because we are not an unverified source.
When you said facts come first, I remember when, I think it was CNN, they did one promo around the time that Donald Trump was first president or in the first election. They said facts are sacred. and you just had so many people who made you question how sacred facts were.
Yeah.
Because you can sit down and the thing that we used to say, somebody before would tell you that the sky is blue and we'd be able to take it. Nowadays, anybody, any politician, anyone tells you the sky is blue, you need to go and double check what color the sky actually is. And it's just a really bad place for us to be in, unfortunately. It's happening across the world. But on the flip side of the question, I want to talk about what you mentioned last time, and that's how we empower citizens for a digital age. Because it's really important that people also empower themselves. They know where to consume the news. They know how to consume news. They know what to think about stories that are being shared and content that's coming out, and also about making decisions based on what we see offline. How do we get into this digital media literacy, especially for the average Nigerian, whose main source is this right now? Or for some people in the north, their main source continues to be radio. But we know that we're battling so many people. We're not the only people available on the phone. So how do we empower our citizens to be able to make discerning choices?
So I think first off, it's why it's important for us to be everywhere. So before now, the audience would come to the media, right? So if you want to get the news, then you need to go to the newsstand and buy the newspaper, or wait for the vendor to bring it to your house, or turn on your TV. Nowadays, what's it called? It's the other way around. The news goes to where the audience is. Right, and I thought if that means that people are constantly on their phones, where are they on their phones, or are they on Facebook, are they on wherever they are at? We want to make sure that we are also there, to check and create a balance to all of that, the millions of other information which they are getting, right? And then we talked, so back to what you now talk about, which is really this whole media literacy bit. It's our responsibility to do that, honestly. People don't know what good journalism is. A lot of people do not. A lot of people don't. Especially people, digital natives, do not. Now, it's a different thing for the older generation. When you grow up in the days of newspapers and TV, all of you want exactly.
Content,
So that is different. But for this younger generation, it's just like everything. You can read everything online, right? And they just don't know, why do I need to make sure it's from, again, when you introduce all the verification, the ticks those days, it was supposed really to be for really verified and trusted sources. But nowadays, even
it's bought for. You pay for it.
You pay for it, exactly. So it's then our responsibility, honestly, to let people know that this is the characteristics of news. Right? This is what news should contain. If X is missing, then you need to look for another source. Do you get? Don't drink from just one tap, essentially. You need to go, who is talking about it, right? Have 2 to 3 channels that you go to, handles that you go to, to say that, has this person reported it yet? Okay, so let's just hold our horses, right? Let's wait until it is here and it is there before we then run with it. Because the truth is that offline, online conversations, online information, news, it has real world consequences. If you on air now just say, you just mentioned one disaster, literally, you know how many people will pick up their phones and start checking people that they have living in those areas, or people start just rearranging their itinerary just because they said what.
Let me hold you on that. We have to go for a quick break, but I'll use this opportunity to plug a show we have on News Central called The Proof. In collaboration with the continent's leading fact-checking organization, we are doing digital media literacy, and we're making sure we give you the truth of viral news. So that's something you need to check out. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's much more.
Hey, thanks for staying with us on Jestiri. We're still talking digital media, and very quickly, I'd like for us to shift gears because we're about wrapping up. It's still supposed to be the Women's Month, although it's felt nothing like it, to be honest. So we want to talk women in the digital space, something we know that our guest is passionate about. And by our guest, I mean Lolade Nwanze. She's still here with us. And we did mention something in the beginning. You may not have heard it. So once again, I want to congratulate her on her recent endorsement as a global talent. I like the way she smiles when they mention that, in digital technology in the UK. Lolade, you rose through the ranks of the newsroom, working in some of Nigeria's most reputable newspapers, then made it into the newsroom leadership. And we are proud of you. Well done. It's amazing. So at least that's one more woman leading the space. But then again, as the numbers are increasing, we're also still seeing that it's not equal footing, and it's not just in the media space like we're seeing. What is keeping the numbers that low? What are the challenges that you particularly have faced in climbing the newsroom or media ladder, and relating to other women's challenges?
Yeah, I think women are still playing catch up in so many regards when it comes to building careers, and that's just because of the way society has been wired, from ab initio, and we are trying to change that nowadays. So seeing more women, I'm glad that you did mention that it's not just in the media industry. However, it is across sectors where women are still trying to, you're trying to increase the participation of women in organization and especially in leadership. It's such that when you, at the entry level, you see lots of women in most organizations, and then the higher you go, the number just begins to dwindle. Like that, you begin to see more men that way they are pairs. You join the company at the same time, but then by the time you get to middle management, reduced, you find fewer women, more men, and then at the top, it's just like you can be the only woman at the table at the top, sometimes maybe two. So what can we do to make sure that those things, those numbers are better? We are going to need to be intentional about it, honestly. First, at the leadership level, we have to be intentional about making sure, okay, you know what, we need to actively increase the number of women in our organization. How do we make that happen? So does it mean that we want to do, want to announce internship programs, for example? Internship programs and prioritize having more female on that program, than men, more female than male. You want to do that, and then look also into just existing policies within the organization. What ways are we supporting the women that are already on there? I remember that after when my first job in the media was at Vanguard at the time, and I was there for maybe about 5-6 years. But at some point when I realized that, okay, I wanted to get married and start a family, I kind of felt like the newsroom could not support. Newsroom is 24 hours, so Michelle, if you it's 24 hours. I've been in the newsroom on a Christmas day before, late night. The way we say, the paper doesn't go to bed, you can't go to bed. So the paper needs to go to bed, literally, By the point I felt like, okay, it was time for me to move into another phase of my own personal life. I said I needed a desk job. And so what did I do? I then moved into production. Thankfully, my training allows me to kind of just move around because I'm equally trained on it. So I moved into production and went into audiovisual production. So I produced reality shows, movies, all of the traveling here and there. But what happened there was I had a Monday to Friday. I was ready to be in the office Monday to Friday. Yeah. I had a resumption time and closing time. Yeah. I didn't need to track news, like 24 hours. You know the way it is when you're not even in the office, but then mentally you still need to keep up with, you're still working, So I feel like I just needed that kind of change routine, So I did that for about 3 years, and then I plugged myself back into into media. But then when I then when it was time for me to have kids also, after I had my 2 kids, I had to take a break, 18 months break, again, from 9 to 5, from anything, just to balance it out, raise the kids at least to some point before you then, continue again with career. And these are accommodations that women who are interested in getting married or raising families have to think of, which men especially do not have to.
Because there's a wife at home who's dealing with it.
Do you get? So, I think it's just the choices really. The moment you choose that you want to have a family alongside career, that is something that that can potentially come up along the line. Yeah. And that's sometimes how we just sometimes lose steam in career. Some women end up going back into the workforce after that. Some do not, right? And so if you just do the math, that's how you have reduced number of women as you go up. So that's why I said that from an organization perspective, we need to have policies in place that encourage women to stay on the job. So whether it's from our maternity policies, right? So sometimes it might be things as little as just having crash, not within the organization, or just being responsive to other female needs within the organization. And then also, we also can be our own advocates. Yeah. Each time I am in a leadership position, I did that back at the Ghana. It was time I was recruiting for reporters. And we were looking for like 5 reporters to join the digital newsroom at the time. And I said that 2 of them at the very least 2 must be female. Yeah. I told them, all the applications flooded in and everything, they would do all the shortlisting. And by the time it comes to my table, I'm like, okay, no, we need at least 2 female here. And we eventually did get that. In fact, we got 3. At the end of the day, in that 5. So it needs to be intentional. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, we still have questions, but at this point, we still don't have any more time. Again, Lolade, thank you so much. It's always a really interesting and insightful conversation where we have you join us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
She's traveling. She's traveling tomorrow. She's leaving her fair country. All right, let's take ourselves out.
Okay, I mean, what a conversation it's been, from the latest twist in the Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan saga to the dive into digital media, women's representation, and the future of journalism. Today's discussions have highlighted just how much the media landscape is evolving and why diverse voices matter now more than ever. As always, the conversation doesn't stop here, the same way the paper doesn't slip. Keep sharing your thoughts with us using #Jasiri, and let's keep pushing for accountability, inclusivity, and a media space that truly reflects our society. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, stay Jasiri. Don't believe everything you see on social media.
Exactly.
All right, for myself and the ladies.
Bye.
Bye.
I love it.